Welcome to my channel. Here, we share inspiring stories of brave and strong people. Maybe you'll see yourself or someone you know in these stories. Thank you for watching. 2.668 confirmed kills. That was Amelia Carter's legacy as a Green Beret Sniper, a number etched in silence across 3 continents. But now, she was just a farmer. A single mother fixing fence posts, raising her kids, and baking pies for the county fair in the quiet town of Silver Hollow. At least, that's what everyone thought. When the Iron Vultures roared into town, their leader, Rex, didn't see the precision in her every move or the vigilance in her steady gaze. All he saw was an easy mark, a struggling farmer in an isolated town ripe for the taking. All he saw was an easy mark, a struggling farmer in an isolated town ripe for the taking. Their mistake wasn't threatening her farm. Their mistake wasn't even targeting the town. Their mistake was giving a sniper who never misses. A woman who knows exactly where to strike, a reason to fight again. In Silver Hollow, battles aren't won with brute strength, but with deadly precision. Leave a comment and let us know where you're tuning in from. If you enjoy stories like this, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next inspiring journey tomorrow. Amelia Carter rose before the sun, her hands already reaching for the coffee pot as the roosters crowed outside. Life on Riverbend Farm, nestled in the heart of Silver Hollow, was a far cry from the adrenaline-fueled years she'd spent as an operative in the military. Now, her days revolved around her 2 children, 14-year-old Emily and 8-year-old Jack, and the small routines that held their fragile world together. "Mom, did you hear about the bikers?" Emily's voice startled Amelia from her thoughts. The teenager entered the kitchen, clutching her phone tightly. Her tone carried a mix of curiosity and unease. "Bikers?" Amelia frowned, pouring a mug of coffee. "They're called the Iron Vultures. They showed up at Joe's diner yesterday," Emily said. "People are saying they're trouble. They were intimidating some of the customers." Amelia set her coffee down, her instincts prickling at the edges. "What else did you hear?" Emily hesitated. "Mr. Parsons said they've been hanging around the gas station and asking questions about farms in the area." "Questions? About what? Who owns what land? Stuff like that." Amelia's jaw tightened. She glanced out the window at the rolling fields of her farm, bordered by the dense woods of Silver Hollow. Financially, they were just holding on. Like most folks in the area, a group like this could smell desperation from miles away. Later that morning, Amelia loaded the truck with crates of fresh vegetables, driving into town to deliver them to the local co-op. She parked and stepped into the small store, where James Parker, the town's unofficial historian, stood chatting with the cashier. "Morning, Amelia," James greeted warmly. His smile faltered when he caught her expression. "What's on your mind?" "Emily mentioned something about a biker gang." "The Iron Vultures?" Amelia asked, cutting to the chase. James' face darkened. "They're bad news. Heard of them from towns up north. They show up, pressure struggling businesses to sell. And before you know it, they've taken over everything worth having." "Extortion?" Amelia asked. "That and more," James said grimly. "They've got a reputation for violence when people don't cooperate." Amelia's stomach churned. "Have they shown interest in Riverbend?" "Can't say for sure. But they've been asking about farms. I'd keep an eye out." That evening, after putting Jack to bed, Amelia stepped onto the porch with a cup of tea. The quiet of the night did little to ease her tension. Martha Whitaker, her elderly neighbor, appeared on the property line, flashlight in hand. "Amelia? You out here?" "Evening, "Martha," Amelia called. Walking to meet her. Martha's face was lined with concern. Saw a motorcycle pass by twice earlier. The rider slowed down each time he got near your driveway. Amelia's instincts flared again. What did he look like? Couldn't see much. But he was wearing a leather vest. Big guy. Martha's words confirmed Amelia's fears. The Iron Vultures were already scouting their territory. The next day, during breakfast, Emily asked, "Mom, are we going to be okay?" Amelia placed her hand over her daughter's. "We're going to be fine. Nobody's taking this farm from us." Jack, still groggy from sleep, mumbled, "Why would anyone take our farm?" Amelia smiled, masking her worry. "No one is. Sweetheart. We're safe here." But even as she reassured her children, Amelia's mind churned with plans. Her instincts told her this was only the beginning. And if trouble was coming to Silver Hollow, she would meet it head-on. The hum of distant engines echoed through the quiet streets of Silver Hollow. It started as a low vibration, building into a full-throated roar as the Iron Vultures rolled into town. A dozen motorcycles, their chrome glinting in the sunlight, lined up outside Joe's diner. Heads turned. Conversation stopped. And an uneasy silence settled over the townsfolk. Amelia Carter was dropping off supplies at the co-op when she first heard about the gang's arrival. Her friend, James Parker, hurried up to her with a grim expression. "They're here," he said simply, jerking his thumb toward the diner. Amelia's stomach tightened. "The bikers?" James nodded. "They've taken over half the diner already. Looks like they're setting up shop." Without waiting for more details, Amelia drove past the diner on her way home. She slowed just enough to glance inside. The sight was enough to confirm her fears. The Iron Vultures exuded menace, leather vests emblazoned with their emblem, hardened faces, and an air of confidence that bordered on arrogance. At their center was a tall man with a commanding presence, speaking with the diner's owner. Amelia knew instinctively that he was the leader. That evening, the tension came home with her. Emily was scrolling through her phone at the kitchen table. Her brows furrowed. "Mom, people are talking about the bikers online," she said. "They've been in other towns before. They don't just stop at intimidation." Amelia placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder. "We'll be ready for whatever comes. Emily, we're not going to let them scare us." Jack, overhearing from the living room, asked, "Are they bad guys?" "Mom?" Amelia hesitated, then nodded. "They might be, Jack. But don't worry. We're safe here." The next day, Amelia's fears were confirmed. A single motorcycle rumbled up her gravel driveway. She stepped out onto the porch, arms crossed, as the rider dismounted. It was the man she'd seen at the diner, the leader. "Afternoon, ma'am," he drawled, removing his sunglasses. His voice was smooth, almost friendly, but his eyes were sharp and calculating. "Can I help you?" Amelia asked, keeping her tone even. "Name's Rex," he said. "I'm with the Iron Vultures. Just thought I'd introduce myself." "Consider it done," Amelia replied curtly. Rex smirked, unfazed. "Nice place you got here. Big, too. Must be a lot of work keeping it running." "We manage." "I'm sure you do," Rex said, his tone shifting. "But managing can get real hard without the right support. That's what we're here for." Amelia's jaw tightened. "We don't need your kind of support." Rex's smirk faded, replaced by a hard look. "You sure about that? Things have a way of getting complicated." Amelia didn't flinch. "I'll take my chances." Rex studied her for a moment, then chuckled. "I like you. You've got guts. Let's hope you've got more than that when the time comes." He slid his sunglasses back on and climbed onto his bike. "See you around, ma'am." As the motorcycle roared away, Amelia's resolve hardened. The Iron Vultures weren't just passing through. They were here to stake their claim. And Rex's visit was only the beginning. That night, Martha Whitaker came over with a plate of cookies and a worried expression. "Saw that biker at your place," she said, setting the plate on the counter. Amelia nodded. "He wanted to introduce himself." Martha snorted. "Introduce himself? That's what they call it now. He's staking you out, Amelia. Seeing if you're gonna put up a fight." "And I will," Amelia said firmly. "They're not taking this farm. Not from me. Not from my kids." Martha studied her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Because you're gonna need every bit of that fight." The early morning mist clung to the fields as Amelia Carter slipped out of her farmhouse and headed for the old barn at the back of her property. The sound of chirping birds was the only noise that accompanied her steady steps. Inside the barn, beneath a stack of rotting hay bales, lay a chest she hadn't opened in years. Amelia knelt and pulled it into the light, her hands trembling slightly. When she flipped open the lid, the faint scent of metal and oil greeted her. Inside was a carefully preserved collection of weapons, equipment, and mementos from her years as a covert operative. A sniper rifle, still in pristine condition, rested on top of neatly folded tactical gear. For years, she had hoped never to touch these items again. But the Iron Vultures had forced her hand. That afternoon, Amelia called Emily into the kitchen. The teenager hesitated at the sight of her mother's serious expression. "What's going on, Mom?" Amelia took a deep breath. "I need to teach you something. Come with me." They stepped out into the backyard, where Amelia had set up a basic training area. An old wooden fence served as a target, and a stack of hay bales formed a makeshift wall. "We're going to start with self-defense," Amelia said, picking up a small practice knife. "The world isn't as safe as I'd like it to be. Emily, you need to be ready." Emily's eyes widened. "Is this about the bikers?" Amelia nodded. "It's about making sure you can take care of yourself. I can't always be there." Emily hesitated but then nodded. "Okay. What do I need to do?" Amelia smiled faintly, pride flickering through her. "Let's start with your stance." The sound of an engine broke the quiet of the afternoon. Amelia looked up to see Tom Cooper's truck pulling into the driveway. The grizzled mechanic stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. "Afternoon, Amelia," Tom said, glancing at the training setup. "Looks like you're gearing up for something." Amelia folded her arms. "The Iron Vultures aren't going away. I'm making sure we're ready." Tom nodded approvingly. "Smart. Those bastards are trouble. I've seen their kind before. I could use some help," Amelia admitted. "You have the skills to rig things up if it comes to that." Tom grinned. "You just tell me what you need, and I'll make it happen." That evening, Martha Whitaker arrived with a casserole in one hand and a knowing look in her eyes. "Tom told me what you're up to," Martha said as Amelia let her in. "It's about time you showed these punks what they're dealing with." Amelia blinked. "I thought you'd try to talk me out of it." Martha snorted. "Honey, I've lived long enough to know when trouble's coming. And I've lived long enough to know how to deal with it." Amelia arched a brow. "How much do you know about dealing with trouble?" Martha set the casserole down and smiled slyly. "Let's just say I've had my share of adventures." You ever hear of the Phoenix Network during the Vietnam War? Amelia's eyes widened. You were part of that? Martha nodded. I might look like a harmless old lady, but I've got a few tricks left up my sleeve. As the night settled over Silver Hollow, Amelia sat on the porch, staring at the horizon. Emily joined her, sitting quietly for a few moments before speaking. Mom, are we really going to be okay? She asked softly. Amelia wrapped an arm around her daughter. We're going to be more than okay. Emily, we're going to show them they picked the wrong people to mess with. The Iron Vultures didn't know it yet, but they had awakened a warrior. And Amelia Carter was ready to fight for her home, her family, and her town. The quiet morning air was shattered by the sound of roaring engines. Amelia Carter's head snapped up from where she stood repairing the fence, her heart pounding. The Iron Vultures were coming. She could feel it in her bones. Amelia jogged toward the house, calling out to Emily and Jack. Get inside. Now, she ordered, her voice firm and unyielding. Tom Cooper's truck came barreling down the dirt road moments later, kicking up dust as it screeched to a stop in front of the house. The grizzled mechanic jumped out, his face grim. They're coming this way, Tom said, his voice low but steady. 6, maybe 7 of them. Amelia nodded, already grabbing the rifle she had retrieved from her barn days earlier. We'll make our stand here. The Iron Vultures arrived as a group, their motorcycles forming an imposing line at the edge of the property. Rex, their leader, dismounted first, his leather vest catching the sunlight. His men followed, spreading out like wolves ready to pounce. Amelia stepped onto the porch, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Tom stood beside her, a wrench in one hand and a makeshift Molotov cocktail in the other. Martha Whitaker appeared moments later, carrying a sturdy-looking shotgun that seemed at odds with her grandmotherly demeanor. You've got guts, Rex said, his tone almost amused. But guts won't save you. Neither will underestimating us. Amelia shot back. Her voice carried the kind of authority that only years of experience could forge. Rex's smile disappeared. He nodded to his men, and the group began to advance. The fight that followed was chaos. Amelia's calm, calculated demeanor belied the storm of action she unleashed. She fired warning shots, her aim precise enough to knock weapons out of hands and force the bikers into cover. Tom's makeshift explosives sent plumes of smoke and fire into the air, creating a barrier between the attackers and the farmhouse. Martha moved with surprising agility, taking potshots that forced the Iron Vultures to scatter. Not bad for an old lady. Huh, she quipped to Tom, who grunted his approval while tossing another explosive. Jack and Emily watched from the upstairs window, their faces pale but determined. Emily held a walkie-talkie in her hand, relaying movements to her mother. Mom, 3 of them are circling toward the barn. Amelia cursed under her breath. Tom, cover me. Martha, hold this position. She sprinted toward the barn, her rifle at the ready. As she rounded the corner, she came face to face with one of the bikers. The man raised a crowbar, but Amelia's quick reflexes sent him sprawling with a calculated kick to the chest. 2 more emerged from the shadows, but before they could close in, Tom arrived, wrench swinging. The bikers retreated, shouting curses as they scrambled back toward their motorcycles. By the time the dust settled, the Iron Vultures had retreated, leaving behind a scene of wreckage and scorched earth. Amelia stood in the center of the yard, her rifle still in hand, her chest heaving. Rex lingered at the edge of the driveway, his expression unreadable. You've made your point, he said finally. But this isn't over. It's over when you leave this town for good, Amelia replied. Rex smirked but said nothing more as he mounted his bike and rode off, his men following close behind. That evening, the farmhouse was quieter than it had been in weeks. Tom and Martha sat at the kitchen table, nursing cups of coffee. Emily and Jack hovered nearby, their nerves still raw. "You did good today," Tom said, breaking the silence. "We all did," Amelia replied. "But this was just the beginning." Martha nodded. "They'll be back. And when they come, they'll bring everything they have." Amelia's gaze hardened. "Then we'll be ready." As the moon rose over Silver Hollow, the Carter family and their allies began preparing for the battle they knew was still to come. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to our channel, it means so much to us. Now, let's get back to the story. The days following the skirmish at the Carter farm were uneasy. Word of the Iron Vultures' retreat spread quickly through Silver Hollow. But their absence only deepened the tension. Everyone knew it was a temporary reprieve. Amelia Carter walked through the center of town, her sharp eyes scanning the familiar streets. Businesses that were once bustling now seemed subdued. Joe's Diner, usually a hub of activity, had only a handful of customers. The unease was palpable. Inside the diner, Amelia met Dr. Kate Riley, the town veterinarian and a close friend. Kate waved her over to a booth in the corner, her expression tight with concern. "How are things on the farm?" Kate asked as Amelia slid into the seat. "Holding up for now," Amelia replied. "But the vultures won't stay gone for long." Kate leaned in, her voice dropping to a whisper. "I've been doing some digging. Their leader, Rex, he's not just a biker. He's ex-military. Special forces. There's more to this gang than meets the eye." Amelia frowned. "Figures. He had that disciplined edge to him. If he's anything like what I've read, he'll be planning something bigger. They don't take losses lightly," Kate said. Amelia nodded, her mind already racing through potential strategies. "Thanks for the intel. I'll keep it in mind." Later that day, Amelia was at the co-op when she heard the unmistakable growl of motorcycles. Her heart sank as 3 Iron Vultures rolled into the parking lot. The leader of the group dismounted, a wiry man with a scar running across his cheek. He strode toward the entrance, his eyes locking onto Amelia. "Afternoon," the man drawled, his voice dripping with mock politeness. "You must be the famous Amelia Carter. What do you want?" Amelia asked, her tone sharp and unyielding. "Just checking in," he said, a cold smile curling his lips. "Rex wanted me to remind you that this isn't over. You might have won a little battle, but you're playing a losing game." Amelia stood her ground. "If Rex wants to say something to me, he can do it himself." The man chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got guts. I'll give you that. But guts won't stop what's coming." He turned and walked out, his men following. The roar of their bikes faded, leaving a heavy silence in their wake. That evening, Amelia gathered her allies at the farmhouse. Tom Cooper arrived first, his toolbox in hand. "Thought I'd reinforce the perimeter," he said gruffly. "If they're coming back, we'll make them regret it." Martha Whitaker joined shortly after, carrying a map of Silver Hollow. "We need to think bigger," she said, spreading the map on the kitchen table. "If they're targeting you, they're likely planning to cut off your support first. We need to watch out for other farms and businesses." "She's right," Amelia said. "We can't just defend this place. We need to defend the whole town." Emily and Jack listened quietly from the doorway. After a moment, Emily stepped forward, What can I do to help? Amelia hesitated, her protective instincts flaring. But she saw the determination in her daughter's eyes. You can monitor their movements online. Any chatter about Silver Hollow? I want to know about it. Emily nodded, already pulling out her laptop. I'm on it. By the next morning, the Carter farm was a hive of activity. Tom had rigged makeshift alarms along the fence line, while Martha coordinated with neighbors to set up a network of lookouts. If we're going to win this, we need to stay one step ahead, Amelia said during a meeting at the kitchen table. They're not just after me, they want the town under their control. We can't let that happen. The resolve in the room was unanimous. Silver Hollow wouldn't go down without a fight. Amelia Carter stood at the front of the town hall, her gaze sweeping over the gathered residents of Silver Hollow. The room buzzed with quiet murmurs of fear and uncertainty. But there was also a spark of something else, hope. People had come despite the risks, ready to stand together against the Iron Vultures. Amelia cleared her throat, and the room fell silent. Thank you all for coming, she began. I know things have been tense since the Vultures arrived. They've tried to intimidate us, but they've underestimated this town. She paused, scanning the faces before her. We can't let them win. They're bullies. And like all bullies, they thrive on fear. If we stand together, we can show them that Silver Hollow isn't theirs to take. A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. Sheriff Luke Tanner stepped forward, his hat in hand. I'll admit, we're outgunned and outnumbered, he said. But Amelia's right. This town's got grit. And with the right plan, we can send these guys packing. The meeting lasted well into the night, with neighbors volunteering resources and ideas. Martha Whitaker spread out a detailed map of Silver Hollow, marking potential choke points and vantage spots. We need to control the main roads, she said, pointing to a narrow bridge that served as the Vultures' primary route into town. If we can cut them off here, we can force them to spread out and weaken their numbers. Tom Cooper chimed in. I've been working on some deterrents, he said, pulling out a sketch pad filled with rough designs for barricades and traps. They're crude, but they'll do the job. Amelia nodded. Good. We'll need everyone to pitch in. Farmers, shopkeepers, everyone who can hold a hammer or a rifle. Emily stepped forward, holding her laptop. I've been monitoring their online chatter, she said. They're planning something big, a coordinated attack to take over key businesses and properties. They're not just after us, they want the whole town. Her words sent a ripple of unease through the room, but Amelia's voice cut through it. Then we need to be ready. They think they're dealing with scared civilians, but we're going to show them what real strength looks like. The days that followed were a whirlwind of activity. The bridge into town was fortified with makeshift barricades, reinforced by farmers' tractors and stacks of hay bales. Lookouts were posted at key points, armed with radios to communicate any suspicious movements. Amelia worked tirelessly alongside her neighbors, training them in basic self-defense and tactical maneuvers. Even Emily and Jack pitched in, with Emily managing the town's communication network and Jack delivering supplies to the workers. One evening, as Amelia sat on the porch of the farmhouse, she found herself joined by Sheriff Tanner. He leaned against the railing, his face shadowed in the fading light. You've done a hell of a job rallying these folks, he said. I've been in law enforcement for over 20 years, and I've never seen this town so alive. Amelia smiled faintly. They just needed a reason to fight. The Vultures gave them that. Tanner nodded. You're a natural leader, Amelia. This town's lucky to have you. We're in this together, she replied. Luck has nothing to do with it. On the eve of the Vultures' anticipated attack, Amelia called one last meeting. The town hall was packed. The air thick with tension but also resolve. "Tomorrow. We stand together," she said. "They're going to come at us with everything they have. But we have something they don't, each other." The room erupted in applause. And for the first time in weeks, Amelia felt the weight on her shoulders lighten. They were ready. As the crowd dispersed, Amelia lingered near the door, watching as neighbors exchanged encouraging words and handshakes. For the first time since the Iron Vultures had rolled into town, Silver Hollow felt unbreakable. The morning of the attack arrived shrouded in an eerie stillness. Amelia Carter stood at the fortified bridge, scanning the horizon. Beside her, Tom Cooper adjusted the improvised barricades, his face set in determination. "They'll come fast and hard," Amelia said, her voice steady despite the tension coiling in her chest. "Stick to the plan. We control the roads, and we force them to fight on our terms." Tom grunted his agreement, holding up a makeshift radio. "Martha's got eyes on the North Ridge. If they try to flank us, we'll know." Behind them, a group of townsfolk huddled in position, armed with hunting rifles and farm tools. Their faces showed a mix of fear and resolve. Sheriff Luke Tanner paced along the line, offering quiet words of encouragement. "This town's counting on us," Tanner said. "Let's show these punks what happens when you mess with Silver Hollow." The Iron Vultures announced their arrival with the roar of engines. Dust kicked up in the distance as a convoy of motorcycles approached, flanked by a pair of black SUVs. Rex led the pack, his imposing figure unmistakable. "Hold your positions," Amelia ordered, raising her hand to signal the townsfolk. The bikers reached the barricade and slowed, forming a menacing line. Rex dismounted, sauntering forward with an air of confidence. "Morning, folks," he called out, his voice carrying over the stillness. "Nice setup you've got here. Real homey." Amelia stepped forward, her rifle slung over her shoulder. "Turn around, Rex. Silver Hollow doesn't want you here." Rex chuckled, shaking his head. "You think this little charade is going to stop us? We're not here to negotiate." He raised his hand, and the bikers revved their engines. Before they could charge, a loud explosion erupted to the side of the convoy. One of Tom's hidden traps, a rigged propane tank, sent a fireball into the air, throwing the attackers into disarray. "Now!" Amelia shouted. The battle unfolded in a whirlwind of action. The townsfolk opened fire, forcing the vultures to scatter and seek cover. Amelia moved with precision, directing her neighbors and taking calculated shots to disable vehicles and weapons. Tom manned a secondary barricade, hurling Molotov cocktails that created fiery barriers. "That'll keep them busy," he shouted, grinning through the chaos. Martha Whitaker coordinated from the lookout, her sharp eyes spotting enemy movements. "3 of them are trying to circle back toward the ridge," she reported over the radio. Amelia acknowledged the call. "Emily, patch me through to the ridge team." Emily, stationed in the farmhouse with her laptop and radios, quickly relayed the message. "They're on it, Mom." The turning point came when Rex, frustrated by the resistance, ordered his men to push through the barricade. The bikers charged, only to be met with a hail of fire from the townsfolk. Amelia took a decisive shot, shattering the windshield of one of the SUVs and forcing it off the road. Rex roared in fury, charging forward on his bike. Amelia stepped into his path, her rifle steady. "This ends here, Rex." He skidded to a halt, glaring at her. "You think you've won? We'll be back, and we'll bring everything we've got. You'll be walking into a graveyard." Amelia replied coldly. Leave now. Or you won't leave at all. The bikers hesitated. Their confidence shaken. One by one, they began retreating, their engines fading into the distance. Rex lingered a moment longer, his face a mask of fury, before finally turning and following his men. The aftermath was a mix of relief and exhaustion. The townsfolk emerged from their positions, cheering and embracing one another. Sheriff Tanner clapped Amelia on the shoulder. You did it. We all did. Amelia nodded, her eyes scanning the battlefield. This isn't over. They'll regroup. Then we'll be ready, Martha said firmly, her shotgun resting on her shoulder. Emily and Jack ran to their mother, wrapping her in a tight hug. You were amazing, Mom, Emily said, tears in her eyes. So were all of you, Amelia replied, holding her children close. As the sun set over Silver Hollow, the town stood united, battered but unbroken. The Iron Vultures had been driven back, but Amelia knew the fight for their home was far from finished. The air in Silver Hollow carried a rare sense of calm after the Iron Vultures' retreat. But Amelia Carter knew better than to let her guard down. As she stood on her porch watching the sunrise, a familiar unease gnawed at her. Battles were rarely the end of a war, they were merely chapters in a longer story. Her suspicions were confirmed when Sheriff Luke Tanner arrived later that morning. He stepped out of his truck, a thick folder in his hand, his face set in a grim expression. Morning, Sheriff, Amelia greeted, though her tone carried a note of caution. What brings you out here? Luke handed her the folder. You'll want to see this. Amelia opened it to find pages of reports, photographs, and financial records. The name Blackbridge Industries was stamped across several documents. Who are they? Amelia asked, flipping through the pages. A security and logistics corporation, Luke said. On the surface, they're legitimate. But dig a little deeper, and you'll find they've got their hands in all kinds of dirty deals. Arms trafficking, mercenary contracts, and, he hesitated, they've been backing the Iron Vultures. Amelia's grip on the folder tightened. Why would a corporation like this care about a small town like ours? Luke sighed. They don't care about the town. They care about control. The Vultures were just their foot soldiers. Blackbridge is playing a bigger game. That evening, Amelia gathered her core team at the farmhouse. Tom Cooper, Martha Whitaker, and Sheriff Tanner sat around the kitchen table, their faces illuminated by the soft glow of a single lamp. Emily, armed with her laptop, sat at the far end, ready to provide additional information. Blackbridge isn't going to come at us like the Vultures did, Amelia began. They're smarter, more organized. They'll use legal loopholes, financial pressure, and psychological tactics to break us down. So how do we fight them? Tom asked, his voice gruff but determined. We expose them, Emily interjected, looking up from her screen. I've been digging into their operations. They've got skeletons in their closet, things they wouldn't want made public. If we can gather enough evidence and make it go viral, we can force them to back off. That's a big if, Martha said. They'll come after anyone who tries to expose them. Amelia nodded. That's why we need to be careful. We don't just fight back, we outthink them. Over the next few days, the group worked tirelessly. Emily created a secure network to collect and distribute information, while Martha reached out to her old intelligence contacts for leads. Tom focused on fortifying the town's defenses, knowing that Blackbridge wouldn't hesitate to use force if pushed. Amelia spent hours studying Blackbridge's tactics, piecing together their strategy. She began to see a pattern. They targeted vulnerable communities, buying out key properties and businesses before replacing local leadership with their own operatives. Silver Hollow was just another piece on their chessboard. "We're not just fighting for Silver Hollow," Amelia told her team during one late-night meeting. "If we take a stand here, we're sending a message to every town they've ever tried to control." The first sign of Blackbridge's retaliation came in the form of legal notices. Several farmers received letters offering to buy their land at prices far above market value. The catch? The offers came with a veiled threat: sell now, or risk losing everything in a court battle. Amelia met with the farmers at the co-op. "Don't sign anything," she warned. "They want to divide us, make us think we're better off alone. But we're stronger together." The farmers nodded, though their fear was evident. "What if they come after us?" one of them asked. "Then we stand together," Amelia said firmly. "If we give in, we lose everything. If we fight, we have a chance." As the days turned into weeks, Amelia's network of resistance grew. She connected with other communities that had faced similar threats, sharing strategies and resources. The more they learned about Blackbridge, the clearer it became that this was no ordinary fight. But for every new challenge, Silver Hollow found a way to adapt and push back. One evening, as Amelia stood on her porch, she received a call from Emily. "Mom, you need to see this," her daughter said, her voice urgent. Amelia hurried inside to find Emily staring at her laptop. On the screen was a news article: "Blackbridge CEO denies allegations of corruption amid growing resistance." "They know we're onto them," Emily said, "and they're trying to spin the narrative." Amelia's jaw tightened. "Then we hit them where it hurts. If they want a public fight, we'll give them one." The battle against the Iron Vultures had been physical, but this fight would be waged in the shadows, with information as their most powerful weapon. And Amelia Carter was ready to lead Silver Hollow into the next chapter of its resistance. Silver Hollow had weathered storms before, but the arrival of Blackbridge Industries brought a level of cunning and sophistication that tested the town like never before. The corporation moved quickly, using both overt and covert tactics to undermine the resistance. Amelia Carter, however, refused to be caught off guard. The fight against Blackbridge wasn't just about Silver Hollow anymore. It had become a symbol of resistance for other towns struggling against similar threats. The first wave of Blackbridge's new assault came in the form of media manipulation. Local news outlets began running stories framing Amelia and the town as radicals, painting their resistance as reckless and disruptive. "They're trying to turn public opinion against us," Martha Whitaker said, dropping a stack of newspapers onto the Carter family's kitchen table. The headlines were damning: "Local vigilantes threaten stability in Silver Hollow," and "Blackbridge, a solution for struggling communities." Emily, sitting with her laptop, frowned. "It's worse online. They've got bots and fake accounts flooding social media with posts about how dangerous we are." Amelia leaned over her daughter's shoulder to read one of the posts. "We need to counter this," she said. "If we let them control the narrative, they'll isolate us." The resistance adapted. Emily set up a secure platform to coordinate messaging and enlisted tech-savvy volunteers to push back against Blackbridge's online campaign. The townsfolk began sharing videos and testimonials, showing the truth of their fight and exposing Blackbridge's tactics. One video, filmed by Sheriff Luke Tanner, showed the aftermath of the Iron Vultures attacks, juxtaposed with clips of Blackbridge representatives denying any connection to the gang. The video quickly went viral, drawing attention from journalists and activists outside Silver Hollow. As the information war raged, Blackbridge escalated their physical tactics. Corporate mercenaries, posing as private security, began patrolling the outskirts of town. Their presence was meant to intimidate, but it only strengthened the resolve of Silver Hollow's residents. One night, a group of farmers reported that their water supply had been mysteriously contaminated. Amelia, accompanied by Tom Cooper and Martha, investigated the scene. "This wasn't an accident," Tom said, examining the water pump. "They're trying to starve us out." Martha nodded. "Classic siege tactics. They want us desperate enough to turn on each other. Then we'll make sure that doesn't happen," Amelia said. "Tom, can you rig up a temporary system?" "Already on it," he replied. The Resistance's breakthrough came when Emily uncovered a trove of internal Blackbridge documents. The files, obtained through a whistleblower in a nearby town, detailed the corporation's strategies, creating artificial crises, manipulating local governments, and profiting from chaos. "This is the smoking gun," Emily said, her voice trembling with excitement. "If we release this, it'll destroy their credibility." Amelia studied the documents, her mind racing. "We need to verify this information first. If we get this wrong, it'll blow up in our faces." Martha tapped the table. "I've got contacts who can help. Let's make sure this sticks." In the days that followed, Amelia and her team worked tirelessly to authenticate the documents. Once they were confident, they coordinated with sympathetic journalists and activists to release the information. The story broke across national media, exposing Blackbridge's corruption and their role in destabilizing communities. The fallout was immediate. Public opinion shifted as people across the country began questioning Blackbridge's operations. Other towns inspired by Silver Hollow's fight began organizing their own resistance movements. But Blackbridge wasn't done. In a final act of desperation, the corporation sent a team of mercenaries to Silver Hollow to restore order. Amelia, anticipating the move, had already prepared the town for the possibility of an armed conflict. "This is it," she told her team during a meeting at the town hall. "They're going to try and make an example out of us. But we're not just fighting for Silver Hollow anymore. We're fighting for everyone who's ever been pushed around by people like them." Tom grinned, holding up a wrench. "Let's show them what happens when they mess with the wrong town." As the townsfolk fortified their defenses and prepared for the confrontation, Amelia felt a sense of pride and determination. Silver Hollow had become more than just a small town. It was a beacon of hope, a testament to what people could achieve when they stood together. The battle ahead would be difficult, but Amelia knew they were ready. Whatever came next, they would face it as a united front, unyielding in their fight for freedom and justice. The morning of the final confrontation arrived shrouded in a tense calm. Amelia Carter stood on the town hall steps, addressing the gathered residents of Silver Hollow. The crowd was larger than it had ever been, swelled by supporters from nearby towns inspired by their fight. "This is our moment," Amelia said, her voice steady but firm. "Blackbridge thinks they can crush us, that we'll roll over and accept their control. But they've underestimated the strength of a united community." Cheers erupted from the crowd. Sheriff Luke Tanner stepped forward, his badge gleaming in the sunlight. "We've fortified every entry point. We've got eyes on the ridge, the bridge, and the back roads. If they want to fight, they'll get one." Tom Cooper raised his voice, holding up a wrench like a badge of honor. "This town's been pushed around long enough. Time to show these suits what we're made of." As the townsfolk prepared, Emily monitored communications from her makeshift command center in the farmhouse. "Mom," she said through the radio, "Blackbridge's convoy just crossed the county line. They'll be here within the hour." "Thanks, Emily," Amelia replied. "Keep us updated." The resistance forces took their positions. At the main road leading into town, barricades of tractors and hay bales stood ready. Martha Whitaker and a team of sharpshooters positioned themselves along the ridge, overlooking the entry points. Amelia stood at the barricade, her rifle slung over her shoulder. Sheriff Tanner joined her, his expression grim but resolute. "Whatever happens," he said, "it's been an honor fighting alongside you." "The honor's mine," Amelia replied. "Now let's finish this." The Blackbridge convoy rolled into view, a line of black SUVs and armored vehicles. The lead car stopped just short of the barricade, and a man in a crisp suit stepped out. He radiated corporate authority, his polished demeanor clashing with the rugged defiance of the townsfolk. "Amelia Carter," the man called out, his voice amplified by a megaphone. "I'm Jonathan Steele, Regional Director of Blackbridge Industries. I'm here to offer you one last chance to stand down." Amelia stepped forward, her voice cutting through the tense silence. "We've heard your offers, Steele. They're not worth the paper they're printed on. Silver Hollow stands united. We won't bow to you or anyone else." Steele's expression hardened. "Very well. You leave us no choice." He gestured, and the convoy surged forward. But the resistance was ready. The battle that followed was unlike anything the town had ever seen. The first wave of Blackbridge's mercenaries met fierce resistance at the barricades. Amelia and Sheriff Tanner coordinated the defense, directing townsfolk to hold the line while sharpshooters on the ridge disrupted the enemy's advance. Tom's traps, hidden trenches, and makeshift explosives created chaos among the attackers. Smoke and fire filled the air as the townsfolk fought with everything they had. Even Emily and Jack contributed, relaying vital information from their command center. "Mom," Emily's voice crackled over the radio, "they're trying to flank us through the eastern woods." Amelia grabbed her rifle and sprinted toward the woods, rallying a small group to intercept the attackers. The firefight was intense, but the townsfolk's determination proved stronger than Blackbridge's hired guns. One by one, the mercenaries retreated. As the sun began to set, the battle reached its climax. Steele, realizing his forces were losing, tried to escape in one of the SUVs. Amelia intercepted him at the edge of town, her rifle trained on the vehicle. "It's over, Steele," she said as he stepped out, his hands raised. "Call off your men and leave." Steele hesitated, then nodded. He pulled out a radio and barked the order to retreat. The remaining mercenaries abandoned their positions, retreating into the distance. The aftermath was a scene of exhaustion and triumph. The townsfolk gathered in the town square, cheering and embracing one another. Sheriff Tanner raised his voice to address the crowd. "Silver Hollow stood its ground today," he said. "We showed the world what a united community can do. This town belongs to us, and no one, not even Blackbridge, can take that away." Amelia stood with her family, Emily and Jack clinging to her sides. "You were incredible, Mom," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "So were you," Amelia replied, pulling her children close. "All of you." The victory at Silver Hollow sent ripples far beyond the town's borders. News of their stand inspired other communities to resist corporate overreach, sparking a movement that challenged the power of entities like Blackbridge Industries. Amelia, reflecting on the journey, knew the fight wasn't over. But for the first time, she felt hope, not just for Silver Hollow, but for everyone who had ever been told they were powerless. They had proven that unity and courage could defy even the most formidable adversaries. And as the stars lit up the night sky, Silver Hollow stood as a beacon of that hope. Unyielding and free, Silver Hollow fought for its independence and won. But the fight for freedom is never over. What does freedom mean to you? And how far would you go to protect it? Share your thoughts in this story with others. Thanks for watching. And we'll see you in the next video.